Behold, my glorious supporter Liliana has asked about limbs. I don't know either. Please don't ask. Captain, today is the day we finally answer the question, what is a limb? Are your hairs very tiny limbs? Is the butt technically a limb? All this and more on my continuing journey to burn this system, Parley, to the ground in the most glorious way imaginable. Liliana, I'm more resilient than that. Come on, keep them coming. Keep the hits coming. What is a limb? What the hell? Okay, so let's start with your examples. Why are hairs not limbs? Why is the butt not a limb? Let me tell you something. So I studied English in college, and I hated it. It was the right choice for me, but I didn't like it. I just don't like school. It's academia that is the problem, and me that is the problem. Not my school was like fine, if not better than most, for me, and my English program was like fine, if not better than most, in general, probably, and for me, it's me that's the problem, right? And I mostly did creative writing. I'm not really interested in the English canon, but you have to do a bunch of that, right? And what I learned about myself and about other people, and the reason that I now do what I'm doing for a living instead of anything directly related to that, although you'll understand in a moment that this actually is pretty related, is that caring about specific grammar rules, caring about the technical definition of a word or something is foolish. That's not how words work. That's not how language works. And understanding, meaning, intention is way more important. Being talking about what something means intuitively rather than what something technically means is far more important, at least to me. And I'm going to tell you, and you can agree or disagree, but from my experience as somebody who is called an influencer by society, it is more influentially effective to care about what a thing intuitively means than what a thing like technically or whatever means. You will have a much better life if you focus on the intuitive meaning. So, to me, immediately from that mindset, hairs are not limbs. Why? Because intuitively they aren't. If I say it, it sounds wrong. No more reason required than that for the sake of discussion. But what's interesting is we have to find a way for fun, of course, to find a reason why they aren't. Like what definition of a limb unmakes hairs limbs? Because I see what you mean. It's like if a limb is a noodly thing that comes off of your body, how long does it have to be? How big does it have to be? What amount of proteins and water content and stuff does it have to have? I so here's a beginning suggestion. Although I can see already this is going to be a problem for the butt. It needs to be it has to be able to go a minimum distance away. Ooh, that's not going to work. Oh, okay. You really got me here. This is not an easy one to just quickly answer. But what I was gonna say is it has to be a minimum distance away from the body. It has to have a minimum amount of articulation. In other words, you need to be able to move it in enough different ways. Ooh, okay, no, I have a cheat. A human limb. You didn't say that I needed to define. Well, you did say what is a limb, but you only specified things on humans. So I'm going to momentarily assume, for the sake of discussion for a moment, that we only have to define what a human limb is. And what defines it is a certain amount of articulation and muscle and separateness from the rest of the body. So in other words, there's the amount of the ratio of connection to non-connection to the rest of the body. This is kind of like defining a peninsula or something on a map. I mean, I don't know if it actually is, but there's some things on about land masses like that where it has to be like a certain amount not connected and not landlocked by a certain amount or whatever, but technically connected to the body and like that. So that cuts out hairs, they don't have muscles, and it cuts out the butt because it doesn't have enough articulation. How much articulation? Is a finger a limb? Is a toe a limb? Okay, so how about okay, one, two, three. It has to have four or more points of articulation. Is that okay? Is your tongue a limb? Your tongue has a kind of undefinable number of points of articulation. Well, does it? I guess it only has one. I can just move it a lot of different ways. That's not what a point of articulation is. Okay. All right. Sure. There you go. But doing it as a human limb is easy. Yeah. You might be thinking, Zandy, that's easy mode. You coward. Do you like to play tennis with the net down too? Yes, actually. For my pleasure. I don't like that one Robert Frost quote. I think it's a Robert Frost quote. Um, and I think that it's not cheating, and that's a great answer. However, let's go a little further. Um, I don't know because depending on the animal, I feel like there are things that are limbs that are like flagellum or whatever. Is a tail on a little minnow? Is that a limb? I kind of feel like it's a limb, but you could say it's just their body going like, I guess to like move them through the water. Hmm. And it has to be a part, I guess. Are there limbs that are not symmetrical? We could add to the definition of a limb and say they have to be they have to have bilateral symmetry or like a minimum of bilateral symmetry. So like crabs, both claws can be a limb because they have a minimum amount of bilateral symmetry. They're not unrelated. They're not completely different things. Uh, but like that. Do pistol shrimp have two guns? I think they do. Is there any animal that has something completely different on one arm, like a blaster on one arm, and not on the other? Crabs come a little bit close, but I feel, it's kind of the same thing. Some people have one bigger arm than they. Humans have different sized feet. I don't know. That's fine. A minimum of bilateral symmetry, right? I think the moment, but the points of articulation thing is good for humans. Maybe we can universalize it by saying something like the number of points of articulation has to be greater, the greatest of any far away from the body thing of the parts of the body that are coming off of the core. The limbs are the things that have the most points of articulation. I find it very difficult to believe that there's an animal. I don't find it very difficult to believe, but I would venture that there are at least not very many backpedaling already animals where they have limbs that have more points of articulation than any other thing they have on their body. And then they also have other things that intuitively feel like limbs. That doesn't seem. However, it might be that would not include all limbs sometimes. So we might have an animal where maybe they have four limbs and two of their limbs have the most points of articulation. The most bendy bits. But then the other two things that intuitively we think are limbs don't have as many points of articulation. So how do we know those are limbs? Are they similar in size? Probably not always. That's hard. I'm curious. My final answer is the the protrusions from the body of the animal that have the most points of articulation of anything on that animal. So of the things that protrude from that animal's body, nose, and protrude means uh more than you more than their hair. Not all animals have hair. More than their skin layer. That might be enough. And it has to protrude, so it needs to be has to have a concave thing. I okay, yeah, sure. Of the things that do those things, so like my nose, my hairs, my butt, my testicles, for example, the things that are limbs are of those things the ones that have the most points of articulation of anything that animal has. So for humans, that means the arms and legs. There's no other thing we have, I don't think anyway, that has more points of articulation coming off of our core that is a protrusion than our arms and legs. And then you're saved from the whole thing about like fingers and toes because, for example, my finger has three. I venture one. Well, I guess I can't do them separately, but you see what I mean, like one, two, three. But my arm has at least four, like one, two, three, and then the fingers are four as part of the arm. And so that fixes that, I think. Tell me in the comments if you can come up with any exceptions.